there is relatively more information about what happened in Armenia throughout the course of this year. So to fill that gap, we have a very distinguished panel today with the first-hand information about developments in Armenia, featuring Foreign Minister, His Excellency Zohrab Mnatsakanyan, Clemen Vule, UN Special Rapporteur on the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and of association, who has recently been to Armenia and prepared a report that would be presented tomorrow with his insights and recommendations. Mr. Arman Thatoyan, Human Rights Defender of the Republic of Armenia, who will present the views on the current state of affairs in Armenia from a perspective of NHRIs. So I would like to encourage you to engage with the speakers in Q&A session very actively and putting your questions and your comments after their speeches. Without further ado, I'll pass the floor to His Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Andrenik, and I thank you all very much for turning up at this event that our ambassador Andrenik has organized. It is now more than a year, slightly more than a year since those events took place in Armenia, which have become to be known to the world as the Velvet Revolution, non-violent, peaceful revolution of love and solidarity. And there is a lot of meaning in that. I'm really very grateful that the Special Rapporteur on the right to the freedom of peaceful assembly, Mr. Clemen Vule. Clemen, thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm also very, very grateful that Arman Thatoyan, our ombudsman, our human rights defender, has also taken effort to travel and join us today at this event. There will be an exhibition opening in a few hours at 4 o'clock in front of room 20, which will also enrich our discussion with some imagery, some more sort of graphic expression of the spirit that was overwhelming Armenia last year. I'm sure that there will be a lot more analysis, more research about how exactly, why, and what happened in Armenia. You know, I have my own emotional sentiment about all this, in that I have spent 6 years in this building in the UN Geneva, dealing with human rights, when Armenia was a member of the Human Rights Commission. I've spent time in the Council of Europe when Armenia was going through a deep crisis of the tragedy of 2008. In my personal experience, I've dealt extensively with the professionals in the field of human rights, both from within the UN system. I think we benefit from our membership in European regional organizations, of which the Council of Europe and the OSCE are very good examples, and which have a very, very big chunk of human rights related activity. We have been working, I see my good friend, the Deputy Head of Mission of the European Union here, with whom we have spent also quite some time discussing and deliberating on these matters. It was interesting, in my view. The Armenian public has that, has that propensity to protest, which is perfectly normal. The whole point was about the quality of protest, and the evolution of protest, and the maturity of protest, the capacity of all the institutions to generate this process in a way that our country could absorb such shock. It all started in March with the march of the future Prime Minister, which mobilized the public support. By 8th May, on 8th May, he was elected Prime Minister. On the 9th of May, life continued in Armenia as it was. This was a very important demonstration of this maturity of the various institutions of the public to organize the protest, organize in a way that we could overcome the risks of deterioration, damage to the state, damage to the society. This was a victory for the nation. And this was a victory of maturity, victory of the strength of institutions. And this was also a result of this continuous work over years, the strengthening of the civil society, the strengthening of the media. It is not to claim that they have come to a level of perfection, but it is to claim they have come to a level which made it possible to go through this process through a non-violent way and achieve this networking of this generated public discontent. Every citizen has been part of it. And the Prime Minister has been very clear, very often underlining this, that every citizen was participant of this process. Every citizen was the owner of the change, the owner of the revolution. And when you will see the pictures, there are a lot of emotional touches to this. But you will see that beam in which the people have been very confident about the way in which they take charge of their rights, of their destiny. What was subsequently happening in Armenia is also quite important and quite interesting. We have consistently, this protest has been generated on this, discontent about certain things that were not taking our country in the right direction. A country which was still going through the big damage of the previous experiences, of which 2008 was perhaps the worst, when we had tragedy, when we had 10 deaths, when we had serious deterioration. Such phenomena as corruption, very low level of trust in institutions, public institutions, the judiciary, low level of trust in the electoral processes, and many other such phenomena. The deconstruction of equal opportunities for all in social and economic life. They have been layer by layer by layer. They have been building up this, protest. Several things have been very interesting to observe. That political will matters. When the Prime Minister and the new government declared that there will be no more requirement for the business people to carry suitcases to the powers that be, while there will be no distribution of wealth, while there will be equal opportunities for all, and everyone will be equal before the tax office. The rules have been generally accepted. And we have shown that it is possible to deal with corruption very quickly when there is political will. It is not to say that the question is resolved to an extent that we do not have to think about it anymore. The institutional strength remains a very important priority. But we have also seen the power of political will. When the government introduced, when the government introduced, no, not the government. In fact, it was still the minority, because it was an interesting situation when the Prime Minister and the government were a significant minority in the parliament between May and December. But when the government introduced changes to the electoral code, they were voted down by the then majority of the parliament. So we basically had the rules, the laws to conduct elections according to what we had before. And we did hold the elections on the 9th of December 2019 in a way that, yes, they were accepted and they were commanded by the international community, and that is very important. But what is most important is that they were accepted by the public of Armenia and by all the participants. Again, the most important thing here was political will. No electoral corruption, no misconduct, strong will. With the existing laws, it's possible when you're serious about it. So again, another very interesting and important lesson, I think, was very important for us. The other phenomenon with which we're dealing right now, we have to complete this revolution. In order to consolidate and complete the revolution, we have to achieve something perhaps the most important: the genuinely independent and impartial judiciary. And that is today the biggest priority. Again, the government is absolutely determined to introduce reforms, practical and legal, which will raise the level of trust in the public towards the judiciary, in which every member of our society will have reasonable trust in the judiciary. We believe this is the ultimate objective at the present time, and this is what we're working on, again, in partnership with our international, with the international organizations. The Council of Europe, in this case, is the source of important expertise and knowledge. The European Union and other donors are very supportive of this. And this is what we're dealing today. This is what is on the table today as the most important priority. Finally, the revolution may face vulnerabilities if we do not achieve reasonable progress in our economy. For that, again, what the Prime Minister defines as the priority of the economic revolution is also about networking the development, pushing the development through participation of the public, which is to say, equal opportunities in economic and social life, expanding the pie, while we're dealing with the tax system. So those are in broad terms, those are what our government is dealing with today. We continue to be very confident about the way in which our public life is organized, the role of the civil society, the accountability of the government before the public through many channels, the media. I am a member of the government. I may have often be very unhappy about the media, but this is what is right. This is what is good, because you always feel the accountability. The method of work in which we engage with the civil society, most matters. In my case, it is foreign affairs. In many other matters, every member of the government, or every government agency is actively engaging with the civil society. On many issues, we have, for example, the the comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement with the European Union, which is a special format of work which engages the civil society. The same concerns the media. From my angle, as the final point, the most important thing in all this was that what happened in Armenia in April, May 2018, what is happening in Armenia now is solely, strictly about Armenia. When you look at the pictures, when you will see the exhibition, you will note that it was about Armenia. That the only flag in all those demonstrations in the squares and streets of Armenia, there was only the tricolor of Armenia. And that was the whole message. There was no geopolitics in Armenia. It was our internal matter. This is the kind of a country we want to build. This is all about us. And it's not about geopolitics. We had to go through certain phases, whether our revolution has certain implications in one direction or the other. And we have been patient enough to insist that we have been building a national security architecture in a careful way. And this is a responsible government which will continue to be very sensitive about national security in a way, but rocking the boat is out of question. And we're faithful to our commitments internationally. We're faithful to our relations with all our partners. And we will carry on doing that. It took some time and patience to insist on this point, but we're very confident that this is the right way. And we do benefit from the multiple cooperation platforms we have in all important directions of Armenia's engagements. It's a good feeling. It's good to be in Armenia. The spirit is good. And whenever you have an opportunity, I would be very glad to see you in the streets of Yerevan to test my assessment and see whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. But not to take it any further. I'm sure that my assessment will be tested already by the two other speakers, and I will see how far I have been right. Thank you very much. Thank you once again for joining us today. Once again, it's a complex process. It's a difficult process. It's a process when you have a huge support of the public. 71% of the vote, of the genuine vote, is not a small thing. It's a lot of confidence. But it's a scary responsibility. Because you know that the people have given you a mandate for a reason. And it's a responsibility to deliver faithfully on that mandate. And this is the spirit with which our government, with the leadership of the Prime Minister, is performing. Thank you.
I would like first of all to apologize about my voice. Since a week I'm suffering about allergy, so if you are not able to hear me, please, whenever I finish, ask me questions, so I will be able to come back. I would like to thank Your Excellency for organizing these side events and involving me. I think it's not usual to see countries the day before the presentation of the report, organizing side event and involving the rapporteur that just visit the country and will be presenting the report. Not to say that the report is completely nice. There are certain things that need to be improved. We discussed during my visit with the minister, with members of the government. not just to say that the report contain or say that everything is good in Armenia, but I think this, for me, shows really the readiness and the will for the government, the current government, really to improve the situation on the ground. And for me, it's also important to attend such side events to also hear more about what's happened since my visit. And as you know, I visited Armenia last November, and I have 7 months after the Velvet Revolution. And this visit was particularly important for me because when I took the mandate, one of the things that I decided is also to use my mandate in order to be able to assist countries that are going through the transition to be able to build strong democracy, rule of law, but also strong civil society that is important for any democracy. And during my visit in Armenia, I was also impressed about the level of openness of the government. I was received by the Deputy Prime Minister, by the Minister, and I met all of the government members that I need in order to really discuss about issues that are important for me, which is the freedom of association and peaceful assembly. And we all see from the TV how Armenians were able to go on the streets to claim democracy, to claim, I would say, a new society. And during my visit also, I was able also to hear first-hand information about how Armenians took this revolution as their revolution. For me, it's really important. I think the minister mentioned also one of the points, saying that one thing probably that also changed in this revolution is that Armenia themselves, they stood up. And this revolution is their revolution. And they also, in this spirit, I also noticed that everybody, from where I was able to go, I visited regions, Gamri, Vanadou. I visited also Dou province, where I was able also to meet around the mining, the protester that was protesting in Amsur mining. I was also to hear from them what is their concern. One thing that I noticed from there is really that all of Armenia feel that the revolution is their revolution. And it is important to highlight because it also changed in the nature of commitments, both from the government but also for the society, to build new democracy, but also new way to live together. I also have the opportunity also to discuss some of the issues that are important. As you can see, during my visits was happening when we have the election. The election was planned for December, but also there was at that time the Prime Minister Nicole, who also resigned to be able to organize to organize a new election where his government can have a majority at the parliament. So it means that the situation where I'm facing is like a lot of violation happened, but the new government is not necessarily responsible for this violation. But the openness for the government to be able to provide me necessary information, but also to be able also, in many cases, also to recognize that some of those things happen, but they are ready to improve it. It was good. It was for me important.
Ladies and gentlemen, the human rights defender or the ombudsman of Armenia is the national human rights institution, an independent constitutional body. It is entrusted with a broad mandate of protection and promotion, effective observance and full enjoyment of human rights in Armenia, being in full compliance with the Paris Principles on the status of national human rights institutions for the protection and promotion of human rights, and enjoying A status The human rights defenders' activities include two fundamental directions: human rights protection, mainly by investigating complaints or individual situations, and human rights promotion through contributing to the improvement of legislation, human rights education and awareness raising, breaking stereotypes, and in general supporting the improvement of human rights system and strengthening the rule of law in the country.
And building a strong framework of human rights. We're also greatly encouraged to hear the comments around women's human rights, both in this room and also earlier in the council chamber, and the political process and the participation of women in the political process. We also take note of the human rights defenders' comments, however, around hate speech, and it's in this that we have some ongoing concerns, particularly relating to recent attacks on and hate speech towards women's human rights defenders. Last year was the 20th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights Defenders, and one of the key messages to come out of the year, something that was reiterated in the General Assembly resolution that was passed by consensus, was the importance of a strong positive narrative around human rights defenders in society, and particularly the onus on governments to be propagating a positive narrative. And it's really for us to urge the government of Armenia to take a very much a proactive step in strongly propagating a positive narrative around human rights defenders, particularly women's human rights defenders who in many situations face extra vulnerabilities. We know that women unfortunately will continue to face these sorts of attacks, but when they have the clear and public and very strong support of the government behind them, and when the general public understands the nature and essential work of human rights defenders, and particularly women's human rights defenders, this goes a great way to combating the sorts of attacks that we've seen recently in Armenia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, points very well taken on this, which are very strongly recognized by the government. And one of the important lessons that we know from our experiences, the most effective way of achieving a result is when you engage the public. You mentioned the attacks on women's rights defenders, or those instances from other representatives which had different views on this. The way in which I would also draw a parallel about the way in which the national debate, the domestic debate, was taking place about domestic violence. There was a big, very complex debate about whether the government should be in a position to enter the privacy of the family, or there were others who were raising the question of traditions, and there was a very, very complex and active public debate about it, which eventually brought to a rather more, perhaps not everyone is satisfied, but at least there is a considerable degree of consensus about the way we should deal with domestic violence. And this is how we moved with the respective legal frameworks for this, which has been a result, as I'm saying, of excessively, emotionally charged, difficult debates. But this is the way in which we believe is a real result, and tangible and sustainable result can be achieved. So this is an ongoing thing. It is a never-ending fight. But for the government, again, I was mentioning the importance of political will. It is with this political will that we believe that the engaging nature of debate, public debate, engagement of the public through their organizations, civil society, and so on. The role of media, again, I want to bring up, that we believe we can move on.
Thank you. Shahriar Haji, Associate Secretary of the Permanent Commission of Azerbaijan. I'd like to address my question to Mr. Zohrab Mnatsakanyan. I have listened carefully to the processes that Armenian people has to in order to establish a democratic state and the preservation of democracy for the institution building. I just would like to ask, what measures does Armenia intend to take as a country that claims to be candidate to democracy? In other words, taking into account the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights dated 16 June 2015 in Chiragov and other such Armenia case, where the court recognized Armenia as exercising control over the territories of Azerbaijan and which amounts to occupation under the terms of IHL. When will Armenia sees the occupation of the territories of Azerbaijan? And my second question is, when will Armenia stop the violation of the economic, social and cultural rights of more than 800,000 Azerbaijani internally displaced persons whose rights have been violated since the very first day of the occupation? And I would like to put my question under the framework of democratic principles, democratic values, which should be carried out by democratic states in both these relations and policies internally, but also at the same time in its relations with external neighbors and other states, and which is required under the terms of and principles of Charter of the United Nations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Nice try, I would say. Now, look, we have been focused on what is happening in Armenia, and Armenia is very confident about the democratic process that is happening. And we believe that democracy in the region, in all countries of the region, would be a great contribution to peace and stability in the entire region. Now, coming back to Nagorno-Karabakh, I had the opportunity to speak about it earlier in the morning, and I would want to come back to it again. In fact, this is something that we have been quite vocal, including in the negotiations. Nagorno-Karabakh is a people. There are 150,000 very real people in Nagorno-Karabakh who have names, who have families, who have homes, and who have serious existential physical security concerns. Why? Because one might want to be reminded that 70 years of jurisdiction of Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh has been laced with continuous systematic discrimination. That in the early years in the early 1990s, there was a moment, or there were occasions when over 40% of the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh was under the control of Azerbaijan. Over 40% of the population of Nagorno-Karabakh has been cleansed. There was a moment where there might be no discussion on Nagorno-Karabakh because there might be no Nagorno-Karabakh at all. There were subsequent, very continuous, government-led hate propaganda, hatred, Armenophobia, which have been raising seriously our claim about the threats to existential physical security. The glorification of a murderer, Ramil Safarov, is a case in point. When a psychopath kills an Armenian officer in the middle of the night, a sleeping officer, and then turns up in Azerbaijan and is received as the hero of a nation for the fact of killing an Armenian, is something to reflect upon for the public of Azerbaijan. When it is repeated, because it is a sign of encouragement, and when it is repeated subsequently during the aggression against Nagorno-Karabakh in April 2016, it is also something to reflect upon for the public of Azerbaijan. So it is all about the human being, those human beings in Nagorno-Karabakh, 150,000 of them, and their existential physical security. There is no other security arrangement for these people than the one that exists today. Armenia is a guarantor for the security of Nagorno-Karabakh because there isn't any other guarantee. Will we accept a situation when, again, we face the obliteration? No. Do we want peace? Absolutely. Is there an alternative to peace? So this is something to reflect upon. So this is a subject that I'm very glad to engage, although it is far beyond the purpose of what we're doing, but you asked for it, you have it. Thank you.